Sword of Coming Chapter 806. Seeing Chao Ci, Chen Pingon clasped his fists and smiled. In Dudwan capital, you are willing to teach Pei Qian 4 times. Thank you. Chao Ci smiled and nodded, and calmly accepted the thanks from the young hidden official. Facing Pei Qian's 4 consecutive rounds in his early years, Chao Ci was very knowledgeable every time he punched. It can be said that he is hardworking to teach boxing in this way. There is nothing bad to admit. Besides, in the 3rd round of questioning with Pei Qian's heaviest momentum, the highest fist, and the latest strokes, Chao Ci also received 2 punches from her, and both of them were on the front door. Thank you to Chen Pingon. I still lost. As for the last challenge of losing 3 games in a row, the young woman Wufu was a little brave, handing out a lot of piecemeal punches, playing very well. In front of Chao Ci, dressed in white, the dust is not stained. When Chen Pingon met Chao Ci in the city when he was a teenager, he just felt that this fellow of his age, dressed in a snow-white robe, had a handsome appearance, like a man in a fairy, unattainable and far out of reach. Looking again now, Chen Pingon could see the doorway at a glance. The robe on Chao Ci's body was a fairy-style robe of the immortal family. According to the obscure entries recorded in the Summer Palace archives, the founding emperor of the Dudwan dynasty, Fuyuan Profound, once possessed a robe called Dashue, extremely mysterious, worn by the monks of the earth immortal, like a saint sitting in the small world, and can also be used to detain and torture the martial arts masters of the 8 realms and 9 realms who have become prisoners. The unruly Wufu, trapped in it, his limbs stiff, his skin was chapped, his soul was tortured, like layers of heavy snow crushing the sycamore tree, bones breaking like branches, and the sound of breaking wood. If there is no accident, it is Chao Ci's body. Chen Pingon couldn't be more familiar with the matter of wearing a robes. The higher the rank of the robes in the martial arts realm, the more tasteless the robes would be, and it would even overwhelm the martial arts. Maybe Pei Cup deliberately did it in his early years, making Chao Ci practice boxing all the time, whether he was awake or asleep, but he didn't stop for a moment. Chao Ci's martial arts qualifications and boxing talents were already too high. In Chao Ci's eyes, the blue shirt in front of him is not only an end-of-life martial artist, but at the same time a sword repairman in the Jade Realm, but it looks like the old Chen Pingon. However, when Chao Ci visited Gongdalin tonight, it seemed that he didn't mean to punch immediately. Or is it waiting for a chance to different? For example, after recounting the past, I accidentally talked about the fall of Brother Ma Zhuxian, and talked about the preciousness of the scabbard, and the master's life is hard to violate. The same truth can be said by Chen Pingon in the bamboo forest, but can Chao Ci come to Gongdalin, can he say it again? No matter what, Chen Pingon just laughed right now. It seems that I saw Chao Ci with a blue nose and a swollen face. On the head of the Duan capital, he lost all 4 games with Chao Ci Wenquan. Pei Qian said straight after seeing his master Chen Pingon in Yunku Fudi. But for some reason, Chao Ci was punched twice by her, but Pei Qian didn't mention a word. Maybe he felt that he lost 4 punches and handed hundreds of thousands of punches, but only punched Chao Ci 2 punches. If he still has the face to say, it is estimated. Master, can you fill up chestnuts? Chao Ci asked curiously, what are you laughing at? Because you have a good apprentice. It may be that the opportunity has not arrived, and Chao Ci himself has no plans to accept disciples. Chen Pingon sternly said, it's nothing. Chao Ci is invincible when it comes to practicing boxing. I think that as far as teaching boxing is concerned, it's a bad time. If I change to me, I won't suffer as many punches. This kind of remark, Chen Pingon can say so comfortably. Back home from a trip to Luzhou in Beiju that year, on the 2nd floor of the bamboo building, Chen Pingon, full of confidence, had to give Pei Qian a punch for the first time in his life, but he fell to the ground with one punch. There were indeed no two punches. Lu Shirlu appeared with arms around his chest, his back leaning against the tree, and smiling at the two pure martial artists. It's very interesting. Asking both sides, the two young men who are already on the top of the world's martial arts, no one has the slightest murderousness, just like two friends for many years, reuniting the old. But it is certain that as long as one side is determined to punch, no one will be ambiguous, and it will definitely be able to play well. Even Jun Qian feels that once these two conquer, they have the opportunity to play better than Zhang Taoxia conquer Pei Cup. It was the first time Lu Shirley saw Chao Ci, and it was indeed brilliant. Just talking about looks, the younger brother can't match it. Worried about Chao Ci's misunderstanding, Lu Shirlu waved his hand. I didn't come to favor Chen Ping'an, I just wanted to watch you fight. Lu Shishir was born with boxing skills, that is, he has never practiced martial arts too hard in his life. Chao Ci clasped his fist and said, Chao Ci, the big-end martial artist, met Mr. Lu. Lu 16 nodded in greeting, and then smiled and said, forget it, I'll leave. But I have already greeted Mr. Shiping. If you want to ask for a punch, don't worry about the damage on Gongdalan's side, Shiping. Mr. has his own means to restore the original appearance. Lu 16 left here. No matter how you look at it, Lu 16 seemed to be beating Chao Ci and beating Chen Ping'an. This brother, he really didn't take the usual path. Chao Ci said, the master has already set off to the ferry crossing of the Tattoo Guishu, leaving only the scabbard to me. The four ruins connecting the two worlds, before being ridiculed by Aliang as the dart of the water god, there are sages, monks, and sword repairs, and they will set off first to go to the wild world, such as the two vice-masters of the Confucian Temple and the third university Gong Jijiu has already gone to the Tianmu ferry. Even if Yu Xian needs to join the galaxy, he will still stare at the Xinxiang ferry from the sky, and after the real man Huolong left the Gongda forest, he has already rushed to the Xinxiang. As for Pei Cup, I went to the Tattoo ferry crossing. In addition, Su Ziliu traveled far away to Rishui ferry crossing. Howren's top combat power, if one does not fall, will appear on the front line of the wild future battlefield. Ma Zhuxian, who was extremely injured, was escorted back to the Duduan dynasty by his junior sister Dauphinxia, while Liao Qingai was waiting for her junior brother Chao Ci, and then rushed to the wild together. Chen Ping'an looked at the bamboo and yellow scabbard, and said with a smile on his hands and sleeves, I have checked many files. There are secrets about the landscape of the Duduan dynasty. I have also asked Senior Song and the mountain gods of the neighboring Jianshui villa. Now I want to hear about it. What you said, maybe I was wrong. Senior Song's sword is named Iran. After searching all over the ancient books, he found the record of the light splits the 5 mountains, the sword chi cuts the great blasphemy from the fragments of the ancient books. It is just that Senior Song has never found the root of the scabbard. Feet, in the early years of Fate, opened the mechanism of the mainstay stone pier of the deep pool, and when the ancient sword stood, the bamboo yellow scabbard was already the sword room of that ancient sword. Chen Ping'an asked the mountain about the mystery of the deep pool, and then studied Pei Cup's age, and finally came to the conclusion that Chen Ping'an asked the boxing Ma Zhuxian for the second reason. As long as it is determined that the age of the scabbard in the deep pool of Jianshui Villa is greater than the age when Pei Cup, the master of Duduan dynasty, possessed the ancient sword, it is enough. Chao Ci shook his head and said, the sword has been separated from the bamboo scabbard for many years. In fact, it is impossible to say who is the master. When the master got the sword, he did not have the scabbard. It was just that the long sword had no scabbard, and it was always a pity. So back then, the master asked the big brother to go to the treasure. Pingzhou, relying on the results of astrology, following the clues all the way, the senior brother finally found this bamboo scabbard. The Pei Cup saber is an ancient sword, Qingshen. This sword became famous too early, coupled with the silence for too long, became unknown in later generations until it was found by Pei Cup. Chao Ci lifted the scabbard in his hand and said, "Master and brother said that it is buying. If the person who holds the scabbard is unwilling to sell, then forget it, don't force it." His master, Pei Cup, the national teacher of the Duduan dynasty, and a woman of the mighty Valkyrie, had been taciturn since he was a child and was called a wooden man by his peers. After experiencing ups and downs, after learning martial arts as a young man, he likes to drink secretly and is more greedy for cups. The wooden girl in the past, on the first day of martial arts practice, wanted to say no to many things. Chen Pingan nodded and said, "I believe this is the truth." Chao Ci continued, but the brothers made their own decisions, and only then did the strong buying and selling in Aquarius. The brother was a military commander from the battlefield. He joined the army when he was young. He led the most elite frontier army in the Duduan dynasty and controlled thousands of miles, guarding the border. For more than 30 years in the military and horse career, Ma Zhuxian has long looked down upon life and death, his own, other people's, robe and enemies. Speaking of this, Chao Ci paused for a moment and said with a smile, "I am not defending anyone, but there are some things that I have to explain to you." Chen Pingan nodded and said, "It must be so reasonable. Only when one's heart is calm can you be truly reasonable." Chao Ci said, "Senior brother lost a punch at the bamboo forest and fell into a state. He understands this matter very well, but he just feels that his punch is not as good as a human. He didn't think he was in the bamboo scabbard and was wrong. I persuaded him. I don't like to hear a few sentences. Brothers don't like to listen to them. Boxing is one's own boxing. It's a matter of one's own family. It's a matter of grievances and arrogance. As a fellow, I won't say much. So I guess in the future, the brother will ask you fist." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "I really like to ask punches, just ask him a few times. I can't stop that Ma Zhuxian asking how many games to lose. Ma Zhuxian will only lose once and then again in his life, and he will end up honestly as a general on the battlefield." However, Chen Pingan said, "As for Senior Liao's questioning, I will care about it separately. It's just a discussion between pure martial arts." Chao Ci smiled and said, "Of course I can trust you in this kind of thing. Otherwise, why should Chao Ci be so troublesome tonight, come to visit, find Chen Pingan, and just punch?" Chao Ci gently threw the scabbard in his hand to Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan stretched out his sleeves, took the scabbard, and smiled. Sure enough, Chao Ci is still Chao Ci. He is a pure martial artist, but he is even more immortal than a man who cultivates in the mountains. Chao Ci said, "I'm already in the Guasian state. You are still alive for the time being, so don't fight for now, and wait until you reach the Guasian state." Chen Pingan said, "When I return to the truth, will you have God again?" Chao Ci smiled and said, "Then I can't just wait for you like this." Chen Pingan thought for a while, "When I travel to the Central Earth continent, no matter whether we are in a bad state or not, I will ask you to ask questions at that time." Speaking of this, Chen Pingan immediately changed his words. Maybe it is still on the side of the Great Wall of Jinchi. According to Chao Ci's temperament, he would definitely go to the barren world, and maybe he would never stay at the Tingji ferry, choosing to travel alone in the barren land and deep into the hinterland. Chao Ci nodded and said, "Then make an appointment in the city or the old place." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "No problem." Although he won't return to the Great Wall of Jinchi immediately, I had looked at the wild world for nearly 20 years on the head of the city, and I saw that Lao Zi's eyes were astringent, so I always had to go. The god of wealth, the Liu family of Ai Aizhou, once set up a no-defeating game about Chao Ci, and the time limit was 500 years. The well-informed people with discerning eyes on the top of the mountain are all aware that this strange gambling game set up by Lu Jubao is actually set for two young people of the same age, and has little to do with the rest of the entire world of martial arts. What's more weird is that the two who made the most money bets, they all bet that Chao Ci couldn't help but lose. One of them is a real fire dragon who is famous for going out without money, and there is also a hidden head and tail unknown identity. At the pavilion, the old Shotzi raised his sleeves, twiddled the chess pieces in one hand, and asked, "Is it impossible to fight anymore?" Lu 16 smiled and said, "Not necessarily." Left and right said, "I will definitely fight." Jing Xingxi, who was drawn by the old talent to play chess, reminded him, "I don't care if you play or not. You put those two pieces back on the table. You can just touch the fish, and you can touch the two key pieces of the chess game." The old scholar said angrily, "I didn't regain my identity in the Confucian temple, so I could touch one, but now I touch one more. What's wrong with you? The scholars can't suffer at all." Shiping pointed to the chess game, "Take it away, and take a few more if you have a face." The old scholar was taken aback for a moment, and was busy picking up many pieces from the chessboard. "Hey, there is such a request in the world, it is strange, I have to violate my conscience and satisfy you." Shiping stopped playing chess, and requested to put the piece in his hand back into the chess box. Looking at the chess game, the old scholar restored the chessboard one by one with the many pieces in his hand, and then said with emotion, "I never wanted to win Shiping on the chessboard, who would dare to believe it when it is passed out?" Shiping smiled and said, "Why don't you say that the disciple who closed the door was not around before, and has been hiding 70% of the chess power? Confront both sides in the distance." Chen Pingan held the scabbard. "Send it to you." Chao Ci shook his head and said, "No." The two turned around almost at the same time. One returned to the pavilion to meet the senior brother, and the other was ready to leave the Gongdalin and meet the senior sister. The two martial arts fighters who have reached the top of the martial arts will continue to make further progress. They walk back to back, and both walk slowly, calmly, and very calmly. One thought, after explaining the truth to Chen Pingan for master and senior brother, it seemed as if he had nothing to do, come to Gongdalin for a walk. It seems a little regretful. One thinks, there are fish and dragons in the rivers and lakes, there are people who run the rivers and lakes, those who run the rivers and lakes, and the people who mix the rivers and lakes. Some people are in the arena, but they will never be a quack. Chao Ci in white, thinking about the young hidden official behind him who did not lose the game, he heard that he would be the best at making money at the bank. "Do you have any bets?" Qing Shan Chen Pingan, thinking that he lost 3 games in a row, and the disciple lost 4 games later, how could he think something was wrong? One who thinks about himself, seems to have been questioned all his life, but he rarely has the idea of taking the initiative to question others. Today, the stars are scarce and the world is quiet, as if it is suitable to learn from others. For no reason, I remembered that the old man on the second floor taught boxing moves before teaching boxing theory, saying that after learning to become boxing, after handing the boxing, he would teach the world martial artist only to feel that the sky is above. The meaning of punching is that there is no one in front of him. When I walk like this, of course there is no one in front of me, but as long as I turn my head, there is no one in front of me. Chao Ci felt that he had just left. Chen Pingan feels that it is outrageous to miss Chao Ci after many years. So the two stopped at the same time. Chao Ci stood on the spot, stretched out his hands and fingers to grab the cuffs of the snow-white robe on his body. Wearing this robe and then handing his fists would not be fast enough. Chen Pingan threw the scabbard in his hand to the pavilion, let brother Jun Qian take care of it, and rolled up his sleeves after stopping. Chao Ci turned his head and smiled and asked, "A game of competition, when you click?" Chen Pingan also turned his head, "You are older and have a higher fist." In the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he practiced extremely viciously, and his way was too wild. However, Chen Pingan had only received a firm punch on the forehead and he was fine. Chao Ci was a little surprised. Both sides are like Changhong, taking a step casually, just like the fairy on the mountain shrinking the land and the river, each with a sip of pure true energy. Within the forest of merit, they can shuttle between each other, either staggering each other's punches, or changing their punches. There is no possibility that one party will hit the opponent or one party will miss out. However, Chen Pingan's godman beating style really failed to converge with fist and intention. During Chao Ci's close together, before Chen Pingan handed out the second punch of the beating drum, he even wiped out the remaining fist and spirit. Compared with Yu Yufu's effort to interrupt the coherent boxing spirit of the godman beating the drums, Chao Ci really has to understate too much. Chao Ci turned his head and was still swept by a punch, hitting his temple. Chao Ci's head swayed a few times, but his feet were steady, but he moved a few steps horizontally. Chen Pingan was hit by Chao Ci's double fists on his chest. It seemed that both hands were handing fists at the same time, but they were two completely different fist intents. Not only did Chen Pingan lift his feet off the ground, he flew upside down 10 feet in an instant. The sword slashed away, and the Wufu's physique was good. The injury was not serious. Chen Pingan had his own means to unload most of the two punches, but the spiritual energy of the monk's chi palace was turbulent, not easy. Chao Ci swept forward and pressed with one hand to hold down Chen Ping's head. Between the world and the earth, there are several Chao Ci in white clothes, one by one appearing elsewhere, each of them punches without knowing the prophet. As a result, Chen Pingan seemed to have suffered 6 punches from Chao Ci at the same time. It was not that he avoided the first punch, but Chao Ci swept his waist with the last leg, which happened to be avoided by Chen Pingan. When Chao Ci closed his fist, he immediately changed into a mouthful of pure innocence, and his knees were slightly bent, disappearing without a trace. Chen Pingan drifted towards the pavilion, slapped his palm on the ridge of the pavilion, and his body revolved, landing further away, but did not land. During the same period, he also changed his breath, and his body disappeared in the air. Exchange punches. In the area of 3 miles, the fists of both sides collapsed and flowed away, and the fists were unmatched, like a river surging, like a million crisscrossing thin sword air filling the air. So that Jingxingxi is not easy to reverse the time. Standing on the bank of a river, Chen Pingan raised the back of his hand to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. Chao Ci stood on the surface of the river, a river with countless vortexes, all of which were torn up by chaotic fists. Chen Pingan smiled and asked, "Does the fist move have a name?" Chao Ci nodded, "Ephemera." Chen Pingan lifted his chin, "Wipe off the nosebleed, just let's both pay attention to what, learn more from me." Damn, what a flash in the pan, a flash in the pan. The name is really not that good. You have to learn from me when you choose a name. Chao Ci smiled and said, "Then what is it for you to swallow a big mouthful of congestion?" Chen Pingan suddenly frowned. In the small world in the body, the unfavorable vision of the shaking of the mountains and rivers appeared without warning. This is the essence of this fist. It's almost the same as the intractable sword energy after the sword repair flying sword passed through. The white clothes were no longer seen on the river, only Chao Ci said with a smile, "This punch is temporarily named Lu Shui." At the next moment, Chen Pingan was punched out of Gongdalin and fell to the Confucian Temple Square. He didn't roll all the way. As soon as his elbows hit the ground, his figure turned upside down, and he fell to the ground in a blue shirt. Chao Ci stepped out of the band of meritorious deeds and came outside of the Confucian temple. Chen Pingan, still wearing a robe, it doesn't care about the slightest difference. Want to deliberately punch me to help strengthen my body, that's okay. Just don't care about winning or losing. Chao Ci squinted, I think you haven't reached this time yet. Chen Pingon smiled and said, you want to go wrong. I think you will return the scabbard tonight. If you don't get a few punches, you will feel sad. That's how it is said. It is estimated that Chao Ci would not believe it. In fact, Chen Pingon felt this reason himself, but he didn't believe it. But in fact, Chen Pingon does have an unspeakable concealment. Because of carrying the real name of the monster clan, his physique is mysterious, and Chen Pingon is easy to feel unstable. In addition, the old fellow of the 14th realm who returned to Tuyua Mountain from the outside world was disrespectful and gave the other party a heavy shame. A handful, so once Chen Pingon let go of his hands and feet and tried his best to fight with Chao Ci to death, his fists and feet would move Dao Axian, and naturally, he would be murderous. If he fights against others, he will live and die. There is no problem, but if you ask Chao Ci about the fist, you will be wrong. Chao Ci was a little surprised. After guessing something, he planned to stop. Asking the boxing is meaningless and even more boring. Chen Pingon took a deep breath and asked, how many punches did you create? Chao Ci said, less than 30. Chen Pingon nodded and said, a little bit less. Chao Ci asked, it looks like, how can you be more serious when you punch next? Chen Pingon temporarily found a way to suppress the monk's state of mind, and nodded happily, but say it in advance, don't accidentally kill me, besides, you are free, no matter how many punches you make, no matter how hard you punch, it will be fine. Before Chao Ci handed his fist for the first time, he opened a fist frame. The white clothes shook, his big sleeves shook slightly, his fists restrained to the extreme. But around the Confucian temple, the aura of heaven and earth began to dissipate automatically. Chao Ci smiled and said, this boxing is called long zuidu, not light. Chen Pingon said, it's just a fist. At the pavilion, Shiping looked helpless, and said to Lu 16, Jun Qian, you didn't say before that they were leaving the Gongda Lin and going all the way to the Confucian temple. Always watching the little brother questioning the boxing process, he smiled and said, Mr. Shiping can work harder, the problem is not big. Just now Lu 16 said something. If you don't talk about the depth of the punches and the height of the punches, just talk about the physique. As a result, the old scholar slapped one, little junior brother hit someone, are you still laughing? Lu 16 smiled and said, no one can let Chao Ci open his hands and feet to punch. Chao Ci removed the robe on his body earlier, which is proof. This means that Chao Ci is a little bit determined to win. The old scholar said, to be honest, it's a blessing that Haoran has Chao Ci. Fortunately, there is Chao Ci in front, so the close disciple Chen Pingon will walk more firmly in the martial arts. Moreover, as a child like Chao Ci, the higher he walks, no matter how tall he is, old scholars like old people, in his eyes, think it is a good thing. The old scholar of course has high hopes for Chen Pingon, a close disciple, and hopes cannot be overstated, but Chen Ping's quarrel with others, whether it's reason or martial arts, you can't think that the opponent opposite Chen Pingon is wrong. If it is not, or it is low, but to ask the other person to be right and taller, student Chen Pingon step by step will be more right and higher. This is the true expectation of Chen Pingon from the bottom of the old scholar's heart. The great avenue of the world, after all, is not the kind of quarrel in the market that must divide the winners and losers. On all roads, people who walk and reason are actually true cultivators. The more you talk about the truth, the more you argue, the more you fist and the more stable you are, and the more powerful you are, the brighter you are. Shiping nodded and said, as long as Chen Pingon can keep up with Chao Ci, even if he is stretched half of his body, it is not a problem, there is still a chance. The two sides are now only half a step away. Regardless of the question tonight, Chen Pingon suffered a lot of punches. In fact, the outcome is not too far apart. As a result, Chen Ping's martial arts realm was originally beaten all the way. Moreover, since the two sides are only about winning, does not seek to divide life and death, so this questioning punch, for both parties, is full of punches, but the killing intention is not enough, and there is no real hardiness, no one in sight, no heart. Lu 16 said, both sides will be here someday, and they may regain a little distance. So the younger brother will be on the first floor of Guasian in the future and must be polished. Ascending to the top of the mountain before the end, Chao Ci may have been a little hasty to deal with the battle on Fuyazu, but Chen Pingan was in the Great Wall of Jinchi, but he had to be more mind-free. It's different now. Chao Ci is too pure. Especially when his heart is together, he will be very scary after practicing boxing. Lu 16 would not have any prejudice against Chao Ci, a young man, just because he was Chen Pingan's senior. On the contrary, Lu 16 admired Chao Ci's aura, as if he was talking to a few people in the world. I must be invincible in my boxing skills, neither arrogantly underestimating myself, nor forgetting my form. This is a very natural thing, and others recognize or deny it as a fact. On the other hand, the younger brother returned to his hometown, but he had to be too distracted. Just talking about the status of a cheap practitioner, especially the few natal flying swords as a sword repairer, will be no small burden. The old scholar stared. Lu Shirley immediately apologized to her husband, Count Mi Crow's mouth. Jing Xingxi disappeared in a flash and appeared at the top of the Confucian temple steps. The two guys were fighting, and they couldn't clean up the mess on their own. Both of you really didn't care about the stunned heads, and only stopped after the Confucian temple was demolished. Almost all the big monks who came to discuss matters and join in the fun have left the boundaries of the Confucian temple and went back to their homes, each busy. So afterwards, many mountain monks regretted that they missed the excitement tonight. How can I think that after the discussion is over, except for those cloud-wave treacherous mountain conspiracies, it makes people feel palpitating, and will only make people more hurried. Some upper 5-level monks who think they are not high will only urge the ferry. Stepping up to leave the place of right and wrong, never thought that there would be such a big excitement to watch. Will there be such a questioning boxing that will be praised by later generations as the battle between blue and white? Chao in white, Qin in Qingshan. The two young great masters actually used Gongdalin and Confucian Temple as the place to ask for their punches, and their punches were like dragons and aura like a rainbow. Although Jing Xingxi had a little bit of resentment, he just didn't delay the time when this boundless person appreciated this questioning punch. He sat on the steps and took out a pot of wine. Chao Ci has many of his own fist moves, and there are many flaws, and he needs to use his junior brother as a grinding stone. Nodding from left to right and saying, Chen Pingan is good at avoiding the enemy and is good at avoiding the heavy. That's why he can change his life on the battlefield. If you want to beat Chao Ci one day, you must first be familiar with Chao Ci's fist. No matter what boxing moves, the pursuit of a complete punch of a few punches and 10 punches, and strive to achieve a certain secluded realm of victory in death, life and death without fail in the final punch, so it is just right to get what you need. Because both sides asked the fist too much, Li Baoping, Li Huai and Jing Yugan all rushed to the pavilion. Li Huai was sweating, and it turned out that martial arts practice is not suitable for him. It is better to study. Jing Yugan had heard of Chao Ci, and he was also a guy who killed monsters like hemp on the battlefield of 2 continents. Jing Yu couldn't bear to see the little uncle, and asked Lu Shirlu tremblingly, Master, does little uncle hurt? Lu 16 smiled and said, the injury fell on someone else, and it would have been rolling all over the floor long ago. Your little uncle, it's okay. After saying this, Lu 16 immediately raised his hands, and as expected, he caught the slap of the husband. The left and right expressions were calm and said, in short, Chao Ci is pursuing the martial arts realm of one punch. You young master, you need to find a way to be familiar with, adapt and then crack the prototype of Chao Si's invincible realm. If it's more susceptible. Li Baoping seemed to have picked up the conversation from Uncle Zhua and said to himself, Uncle Junior and Chao Si, there are still no one in front of them. The left and right eyes were relieved, and there was a little smile. Aquarius is very accurate in what he said. Therefore, I asked both sides, the person standing in front of them is actually a future Chao Si, and a future Chen Ping'an. For the sake of little treasure bottle, the old Xiuzai raised his hand and dropped it again, patting the left and right shoulders lightly. On the Confucian Temple Square. A group of masters, including Mr. Li, all showed up because they had listened the news, rushed over to drink and watch the battle, as it was a heavy business, and I found a chance to relax. As a result, the two boys were not too old and had a big arrogance. They didn't seem to want to be watched by too many people. They actually got up at the same time and went directly to the sky to ask for punches. A touch of blue and a touch of white, they traveled far away from the sky, changing their fists continuously, retreating, and then colliding together in an instant, the boundary of the Confucian temple, thunder shaking, many people awakened one after another put on their clothes and opened the window to see, hanging high, there is no sign of rain. In the middle of the night, Chen Ping'an opened his eyes, hesitated for a moment, still did not speak. The husband seemed to be alone in the middle of the night, walking by, but stopped for a while, but didn't stay long. Chen Ping'an continued to hold his breath, pinch the sword art, and sit on the futon. Early that morning, Chen Ping'an walked out of the house and found that only the seniors were sitting in the courtyard, flipping through a book. He glanced at Chen Ping'an and said left and right, I will let Aquarius and the others come here in a hurry. They'll talk about it this afternoon. Continue reading left and right. Chen Ping'an sat aside, he stopped talking. Without looking up, say what you have. Chen Ping'an bit the bullet and said, Brother knows roughly what Jiang Longxiang is like. But it is difficult for senior brother to really be an enemy of Jiang Longxiang. Put down the books in his hand, turned around, and asked, How do you tell? Chen Ping'an gave the answer in his mind, because brother is a scholar, no matter how good his swordsmanship is, he still speaks the rules and abides by etiquette when he uses his sword. In addition, the brother doesn't know what Jiang Longxiang has done, bad things, good things, they don't know. As for Jiang Longxiang, the brother will only know more about what is intentional to do good, which is to seek fame in the wild, and what is unintentional to do good. Since he does not know, the brother will actually be at a loss when facing these people and things. The left and right faces were expressionless, but he didn't stop the little brother from teaching himself this brother. I know. Chen Ping'an said to himself, I'm like Jiang Longxiang's accountant, the kind who will help him keep accounts and don't charge money. Jiang Longxiang's kind of money that makes me improper, it's not acceptable. So I deal with Jiang Longxiang's kind of people, I'm much better than the brothers. I know how to make them really suffer. Even if I only suffer once, I can make them fear for a lifetime. Thinking that the wicked have their own grievances by the wicked, it is wrong. If the wicked only grind the wicked, it is not right to grind the wicked with evil things, repay grievances directly, and repay virtue with virtue. With these words, Chen Ping'an was mentally prepared for the irritation of his seniors. After all, a little disrespectful. It's just that I don't vomit, I want to talk a long time ago. Left and right said, Go on. In the distance, the old scholar and Jun Qian are hiding and looking at the mountains and rivers. The husband and the student are holding their breath and looking intently, watching the excitement. Here, Chen Ping'an said tremblingly, Brother, I have finished speaking in my heart, it is not considered truthful, senior brother has the final say. Looking at Chen Ping'an from left to right, he suddenly laughed. Chen Ping'an had never seen that look in his brother's side. The first thing the Taoist Nin entered into the Gongda Lin was not to look for Li Huai, but to directly find Wenxing's highest lineage, an old scholar. Otherwise, look for Lu 16, the oldest and extremely hard-fisted. Or the one who chased after Shao Sun and kept chasing to the left and right of the sky. As for Chen Pingan, the relationship is average and unfamiliar. After discussing with the old scholar, the Taoist Nin went away with satisfaction, and returned with satisfaction. In private, he sighed with Li Huai. Mr. Wenxing's knowledge is still very high. Li Huai said strangely, Lao Nen, I haven't talked a few words about this, how did you see it? Taoist Nen said, I can understand all the truths Wenxing said. In the end, the old gentleman asked Wild Tao Pavilion a question. The same reasoning is that when the saint of ritual stands in front of you, you feel that it makes sense. If the ordinary master tells you, it feels unreasonable, right? Taoist Nen gave the answer in his mind at the time, and of course it was wrong, but if you put yourself aside and ask yourself, you still only listen to the principles of the saint. Taoist Nen felt that as soon as he uttered these words, he was planted on Wensheng's side, but he still didn't regret it. Instead of lying to Lao Xiuzai, he had better speak out. Besides, are scholars cheating? Of course it's not easy to lie. Since you can't fool the other party, you can't fool yourself anymore. However, the old scholar was not at all angry. Instead, he said, not that kind, but still a small kind, so there will always be a chance for a gentleman to be good and evil in the future. Taoist Nen didn't dare to stay in Gongda Lin for a long time, and immediately found an excuse to leave. Having a good chat with the old talent, but it is tantamount to learning and learning with Wenxing, already very contented. Gu Qingsong and Lu Daochen, these two Taoist friends, obviously have no such skills. In the afternoon, when Chen Pingan came to see him with all three of Li Baoping, he said that we should go to the highest place of merit to chat. Li Baoping's eyes lit up. The highest point of Gongdalin is not a pavilion for playing chess, or a book building, but an ancient cypress. The road led by Li Baoping. Jing Yugan felt that this senior sister's knowledge was very mixed, and he knew everything. So Chen Pingan, Li Baoping, Li Huai, and Jing Yugan all sat on the branch of the ancient cypress tree, just chatting. As a young uncle, Chen Pingan, he talked about whatever he thought of. He said that I never thought about becoming the person I am now. I can't think about it first, and I don't want to do this in particular. If I can, I am willing to take a lot of precious things for one or two of the most precious. But when I see you, I feel it's worth it, there is nothing to complain about, it's already very good. Spreading his palms, Chen Pingan joked, saying that there was sunshine, moonlight, autumn breeze, and spring breeze in his hands. He also said that practicing on the human relationship story broke my hesitation in my heart. This evening, except for the old scholars, the students and the disciples of the retransmission, all packed their luggage and parcels, ready to leave the Confucian temple and travel far away. Left and right asked, Sir, what can students do? Ask what this does, no need. The old scholar smiled and said, but you can ask yourself what you can do as a senior. There was a moment of silence left and right. Little junior brother can always take care of himself, I feel relieved. Chen Pingan was a little flattered, and after holding back for a long time, he could only say, Brother, I've been rewarded. Left and right said, accept. Chen Pingan said, okay. When there is gathering, there will be scattered. Life seems to be everywhere in the ferry crossing. Left and right will return to the Great Wall of Jinchi. Lu 16 said that he would take Jing Yugan and go to the Western Buddhist country first. He had already helped this great disciple find a place to practice, and then went to the Qingming world alone to find his friend Bai Yi. Mao Xiaodong will stay in the Book of Rites Academy to help Confucian scholars preach and teach karma. Chen Pingan needs to return to the night ship immediately. Li Baoping and Li Huaihui returned to the Shanaya Academy in the capital of the Sui dynasty. Every direct disciple and riposte, each has its own best, and in the eyes of the elderly, they are all the best. So the last parting words of the old scholar was just a smile and said, "All are fine and safe. Wait until everyone is gone." The old Shotsai sat alone in the pavilion, but this time, the old man did not have much parting and sadness, but looked forward to the next reunion. I just remembered a little poem that the disciple who closed the door was sitting on the tall branch, drinking wine, and they casually ridiculed Xiao Baoping. Extremely beautiful. An orchid in the mountain. It has never seen the world before, and the world has never seen it. Doesn't it bloom? Sort of coming Chapter 807. Each has a ferry, each has its own boat. Fortunately, when I met Shirkong, it was calm. Two scholars in green shirts of very different ages stood side by side on the cliff, the sea and the sky and the earth. It's no wonder there are so many people from the mountains who follow the trail of the Taoist fairy in the cliffs. Chen Pingon was a little surprised, because when he came, he was invited by the saints of rituals. He protected the road all the way to the Confucian temple to participate in the discussion. When he went, he was sent off by the saints of rituals. Of course he couldn't think of it. It was his husband who persuaded Li Xing to accompany the closed disciples on this trip with the excuse that good gatherings are good and scattered. Li Xing smiled and said, "You are in business, you are very skillful." Chen Pingon was a little embarrassed, and he was really not idle this time. Li Xing smiled. In fact, he was teasing the young hidden official who was a fan of money and made a business. Earlier, at the entrance of the Confucian temple, Lu Ji helped to build the bridge. Mrs. Qingshan was willing to give away a few bamboos to the Luopa mountain, but the boy ran into it and had to spend money to buy it. I guess he still felt that he was making a profit now. Chen Pingon took the courage and asked cautiously, "Can you ask a question with the saint of worship? Why is the fifth world named Wucai?" Li Xing smiled and said, "You can understand it as a certain expectation of the most holy master, such as 100 flowers blooming, colorful, and beautiful in the world." I know what abacus this kid is playing, but Li Xing didn't want to make him fulfill his wish. Feishing City has taken the lead in the colorful world, and it is inappropriate for the Confucian temple to make an exception. Seeing that Li Xing didn't intend to break the secret, Chen Pingon had to give up. This point of vision was still there. Li Xing said, "How do you feel when you travel long distances all year round and often deal with the gods of mountains and rivers?" Chen Pingon thought for a while. It seems that most of them will gradually feel tired of the world. New gods are often full of enthusiasm, no matter what the original intention is, or absorb the essence of incense, temper the golden body, or work diligently to benefit one party, regardless of the size of the respective mountains and rivers, a landscape who is responsible for helping the emperor and monarch regulate yin and yang, as there are so many things to do. But over time, the mountains and rivers are intact, and everything needs to be done step by step. The mountains and rivers are different from the cultivators. They don't need to practice hard. Over time, even if the golden body of the gods is still rejuvenated, there will be more or less twilight on the body. Tiredness, depression. Speaking of this, Chen Pingon said, "But there will be many exceptions, such as the buried river water god of the Tonghai Daquan dynasty. It seems that after 1,000 years she will still be vigorous and caring for the people, and she will not think of herself as a water god." Empress. Li Xinghui smiled. Not a family, do not enter a family. It is enough for the old scholar to talk about it many times. He praised the water empress who tactfully treats guests warmly, admires and is proficient in both the ritual saint and the literary saint. Among the old talented students, apart from Chen Pingon who was beside him, even the one who had never taken care of everything, specifically mentioned the god of buried river water in Bio Palace. It's just that the two old talented students spoke relatively fair, just one or two sentences, not annoying, but they are not too heavy. For this reason, the Li Xing had previously looked for Jing Xing in the Confucian temple to take out the files, and carefully read the files about Daquan Bai. Li Xing asked, "Do you know where this is?" Chen Pingan nodded, and glanced at the road when he came. It is a mountain sect with extremely strong spiritual energy from heaven and earth. The spiritual energy is condensed, like several rivers hanging in the air, haunting several mountains, and the weather is majestic. Not surprisingly, it is legendary. Shanhaizong and the sect are all female monks. According to legend, the founder of Shanhaizong, a woman named Nalan Xianqiu, who is proficient in fire, once made a great aspiration to move mountains and mountains to fill the world. In this realm, there are so many rumors that there are so many mysterious birds, monkeys watching the sea, foxes worshipping the moon, and Tengu eating the sun. In that battle, Nalan first showed off to the sea. She was the first to find the throne demon Fei concubine. She heard that she was seriously injured in a fight and had to retreat, so she failed to participate in the Confucian temple discussion this time. The reason why Fei Fei was detained by the Confucian temple among the mountains of Laojun Danlu, the founder of Shanhaizong, can be regarded as the first contribution. Chen Pingan is no stranger to these sects located on the top of the Shenzhou mountain in the Middle Earth, not to mention the Shanhaizong, which is similar to the Lu clan of Aiazhao, the Tianqing Shinshan of Zuheidong and the Yu clan of the Xuanmi dynasty. The place where embroidered tiger Chui Yang opened the door to welcome guests. Regarding this matter, Chen Pingan asked the brothers and sisters about this matter. They said that it was because there was an ancestor and daughter in the Shanhai sect, who was a direct disciple of the ancestor of Nalan. Chui Yang has something to do with the righteousness of the sect, but more about the love of his children. Chen Pingan clasped his fist and thanked him, thinking that Yu Feng would swim far to the sea and stay here. After all, it was a bit out of place, but before he could speak, the old woman patriarch smiled and said, "Why, relying on being a sword repairer and not giving face?" Chen Pingan had to sit cross-legged, looking at the sea without squinting, pinching his hands with both hands, quietly and no longer speaking. Anyway, it only takes half an hour. There was no reason for the three people not far away and did not move. It seems that the two parties close at hand are doing their own things and saying different things. In fact, where and what in life and who is not? Chen Pingan had previously looked for Lu Cha on Gongdalan's side. He didn't have any intentions. He just chatted with this savage swordsman who was once the highest swordsman in the world. After Xing Shiping helped to open the door to the secret realm, Chen Pingan found the big bearded ranger who was sitting by the lake and fishing. After sitting aside, Chen Pingan asked curiously, "Do you have any deeper intentions for naming the big disciple Zhushi?" Lu Cha said, "It's almost as you guessed. The old sword immortal Dong Sanging of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, originally his sword was 1 foot high, but it was broken in the wild. Dong Sanging used a bamboo scraper to carry the head of an ascending demon. After returning to his hometown, he cast it. Created a new sword, named Bamboo Sponge. Although he was a prisoner, Lu Cha looked indifferent. In fact, there was nothing to talk about with the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, but Lu Cha was willing to say a few more words about this. The sword repair of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, for thousands of years, I only admire Dong Sanging. If I were to travel through the vast world and use a sword like him, I would have died a few times earlier. When I met Aoyang in my hometown back then, the reason why the two of us became friends was largely because Aoyang claimed to be Dong Sangjing's year-end friendship. That guy said sincerely, I believe it." Knowing the answer, Chen Pingan was actually already satisfied. After watching Lu Cha's fishing for a while, one couldn't hold back and said, "Senior, you're fishing like this. To be honest, it's like eating hot pot and splashing soup on your face." I. Lu Cha was silent. The scholars of Jinchi Great Wall couldn't listen to what they said. Chen Pingon glanced at the fish basket. I can catch such a few fish. It's not that the senior's skills are improvised. Either those fish are hungry and panicked and reborn in a hurry, or their luck is so bad, like a roadside drunk throwing into the gutter. Lu Cha asked, "Are you particular?" "I'm still not interested in practicing sword here www. Until novel. Calm, so I only have to go fishing." Lu Cha deliberately gave up his status as a gas trainer, otherwise he would be completely boring. Chen Ping'an asked, "What do you think of it?" "If we say that earning money is for living, life can't just earn money. So going to the mountains to practice is life, and life cannot just be practice. You just need to practice swords and martial arts, earn money for practice, and read and study." Chen Pingon opened his eyes, but still did not find the trace of the night ship. The three around him, probably because they were in their own turf. Nalan Xianxiu had already twisted out embroidered bags and changed some dry smoke. She was deserted and didn't like to talk. The other two were more verbal, especially the girl's appearance. The ghosts of Chao Xi, Fu Su, and Su Bai are all particularly interested in young handsome men. They chatted with the quirky little girl. The little girl thinks Chao Xi looks better, and she is called Fei. Sister Cus, but said Fu Su is better, because the chief apprentice of the city lord of the Baidi city is a sword repairman. Compared to the fist-fighting man, his grace is definitely better than natural. The little girl glanced at the Qingshan Jinxiu, and felt that the man next to her seemed to be okay. Chen Pingon just pretended not to hear or see anything. Never wanted to talk about it, but Feizui talked about that Confucian temple questioning boxing. It turned out that only a few days ago, the news spread from the Confucian temple to the Shanhaizong. There are many things in the world, but there are always a few things that will be talked about. Just like some people, they will stand out from the crowd, and some things will be refreshing. The little girl seemed a little gloomy. She had been talking non-stop, but suddenly she stopped talking. Maybe it's fighting injustice for Chao Xi. Think that some hidden official slapped Chao Xi in the face because he didn't talk about the justice of the world. Feizui has a carefree temper. Turning his head to the dull-gored man, he said, "You are a sword repairer, the least immortal, right? You must have a good vision. Then you think that questioning boxing, if the two sides split life and death, what will happen?" Chen Pingon smiled and said, "I don't know much about the way of Wu Fu, so it's not easy to jump to conclusions. But I guess, as long as you ask Chao Xi, whether it's the victory or the life or death, at most one hand, besides the vast world, all Takashi, 10 out of 10 will lose, there will be no suspense." Among the first-hand numbers are Pei Cup, Song Changjing, Zhang Taoxia, and Li Er. The sick girl raised her eyebrows. Upon hearing the fair words, she became happy again. She shook her head and said with a high expression, "What a hidden official, what a sword fairy in a green shirt, such a bad temper, this guy is too ill to clean up. Well, if I am the fairy Yunyu of the Zhoushan Immortal Hall, how can I be changed to Jingzhuzhong again, hee hee. If that guy dares to stand beside me, hee hee hee." Chen Pingon, who was sitting aside, nodded gently, agreeing, and agreed with the little girl. The little girl who has been looking at this person secretly from the corner of her eye, stretched out her thumb. "This sword fairy, he listens well, looks very good, looks. Okay, you will be my friend from now on." Chen Pingon smiled warmly and nodded gently. Naturally, the little girl was born in the mountains at a glance. The little girl asked casually, "Are you waiting for the fairy, where are you going?" Chen Pingon said, "Go to Luzhou, North Ju." The little girl snorted and said with an old manner, "Your hometown is Beiju Luzhou, a good place, no wonder, there are many swordsmen repaired there." But my hometown is Beipingzu, I will take you there in the future. Chen Ping'an was stunned for a moment, but didn't ask much. This little girl with a low level of cultivation, white at the Middle-earth divine continent, which came across continents, seemed to have a low status on the side of Shanhaizong. Although I don't know why, Chen Ping'an has a better impression of Shanhaizong. Nalan Xianxiu knocked on the stone cliff with a dry tobacco rod, twisted some tobacco leaves out of the bag, and glanced up at the sky. She was startled. She recovered and asked with a smile, I like to smoke dry cigarettes too. Chen Ping'an shook his head, I have never smoked. She smiled and said, it's actually more interesting to drink than a drunkard. Chen Ping'an smiled and didn't say anything. Except for those bamboos on Qingshan Mountain, they will follow the Xianmi dynasty's intercontinental ferry phone kite to Luopa Mountain. This time, Chen Ping'an returned with a rewarding experience during the Confucian temple discussion. The pot of calamus presented by the of Jui Mountain and the origami wui swallow presented by the lady of Yanzishan Mountain were all removed by the husband and given to Chen Ping'an. As for the box of powder, Chen Ping'an did not hesitate to receive it, and he was particularly at ease. Or give it to Brother Junqian. It's not necessary to be violent. Chen Ping'an accepted these three at the time. Chen Ping'an confiscated the rest, no matter how he persuaded him, he just refused to agree. The reason is very good. The husband will have more and more disciples in the future, so he has to have some belongings of his own. But when he was leaving, the husband gave the thing that Lu Kaishan accidentally dropped to the closed disciple, saying that this thing, Luopashan will do a big deal in the future, it must be used, anyway, as long as Luopashan earns money. Money is equivalent to Wen Xing's line of earning money. At the same time, the old scholar smiled and took out 2 scrolls from his sleeves. Let Chen Ping'an guess. Actually, Chen Ping'an doesn't need to guess, knowing that it must be the work of Su Zi and Lu Qi. Chen Ping'an felt that he had a good habit of listening and persuading him. For example, he quickly heard the words of the real Hulong, doing business, and his face became thinner, and it was really impossible. Young people have to listen to the old sayings the old people say, and they have to do it. So Chen Ping'an heard that the immortal Yunyi had not left Auto Mountain, and immediately sent a secret letter to the owner of the Zhoushan Immortal Pavilion who did not know him. The immortal Yunya quickly answered a letter quietly, sending something to Gongdalin. It's the white jade Ganoderma lucidum of semi-fairy rank. Not only does Yunya cut the meat like this, he is willing and relieved instead. Yunyo's awe for the Baidi city lord has been exaggerated to the point of indescribable. Jing Zhezhong's behavior is really unbelievable, and he can hide from the sky. One of the clones has gradually become a close disciple of Wen Xing's line. This makes sense, why a foreigner, at a young age, can become the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi and return to the world alive. Is this a big deal between Jing Zhuzhong and Cui Yang, the sage and old scholars, and the Zhongta Confucian Temple? Could the first mover in this game be the Kaiyan game of the year? Look, the first move on this board has been deliberately known to the world, but what is the result? Hasn't it been successfully concealed from all the monks in the world? After Yunyi secretly sent the white jade Ganoderma lucidum to Gongdalin, the immortal walked from the bottom of his heart to the courtyard, and then headed towards the county town of Panshui, with words in his heart, praying for a long time. Of course, Chen Ping'an didn't see that scene, but he could roughly imagine the mood of the immortal Yunli. A priceless white jade Ganoderma lucidum, engraved with 2 lines of inscriptions, has excellent meaning. 1,000 years of shining and flawless people, the home of Baisher Zhilan Youxiang. With this semi-immortal soldier, then the expenses on the parrots at the Parrot Island, plus the credit for buying bamboo from Kingshanshan, will be paid back. Above the sea far away, a bright sword light rose into the sky. Chen Ping'an looked up. Nalan Xianxiu squinted, then turned to look at the young man. She knew his identity. Asking Jindu, a pink robe landed on a ferry that had just set off. Lu Qiqing casually threw a grain of rain money to the ferry steward to see Tao Ting Taoist friends off. As a result, in the cabin house, I saw a scrawny old blind man. Lu Qiqing, who was going to have a good meal with Tao Ting, just greeted Tao Ting and came and went. The one who even Gua Outing dared to beat up casually, Lu Qiqing weighed it up and couldn't afford it. Of course, the most fundamental reason was that the brother was no longer in Panshui County. Inside the house, the old blind man and Li Huai were sitting, the Taoist Nen was standing, not daring to breathe. There was still the bonsai on the table, and an old tree spirit from the south stood on the top of the mountain. The old blind man asked, Li Huai, do you want to have a clever servant girl? I can go to the wild world to help you catch one. Li Huai rolled his eyes and didn't bother to talk to the old blind man. The old blind man became accustomed to it, and turned his head. The tree spirit had just claimed to have seen an ancient sword fairy with the name of Pure Yang. The latter was born in the line of Taoist sword fairy, and he had consulted himself on swordsmanship, and he just gave him some advice. Go up. The old blind man asked, with such a big tone, you grew up drinking northwestern wind. The old tree spirit was displeased when he heard it, and with his hands on his hips, he asked loudly, Li Huai, who is this guy? His tone is so aggressive. Li Huai smiled and said, most of my masters don't know the name yet. The old tree spirit groaned and said nothing. Seeing that the tender Taoist, the way he is not shallow, he can be brothers and brothers with Lu Daochen, no jade is unreasonable. Since the tender Taoist is Li Huai's obey, then the old blind man in front of him is Li Huai's master, of fairyland, most of them can't escape. If you are in the bag house, what immortal is not a problem, today you are down, you must be sent under the fence, and you still have to judge the time and judge the situation a bit, so I didn't like the mouthful. What the old blind man broke. The old blind man turned his head and faced the ascending realm of Tao Pavilion, Aranan Taoist. How can it sound like a white Falu Yushin with such a resounding name? The yellow-clothed elder smiled dryly. This is the road number that the young man helped to get on the road to Howran. I am not worried that I don't have a nickname and go out with the young man. It is easy to make my son look down on outsiders. The old blind man laughed and beckoned. Tao Ting was suddenly pulled over. He had to bend his waist, tilt his head was caught by the 5 fingers like a hook, and obediently maintaining such a funny posture, Tao Ting did not dare to hide. Under your fingers, it's crunchy. Tao Ting did not dare to speak. The old tree spirit was so excited that he turned his head and didn't dare to look at it, but he hurt it terribly. This old blind man is not a good crop. Li Huai quickly got up and slapped the old blind man's arm. Okay, don't always bully Lao Nen like this. Just keep the door closed at home. Outside, you can save Lao Nen some face. The old blind man released his hand and slapped Tao Ting's side face with a slap, causing the latter to slam to the ground. He said with heart, in the future, he will only take care of his own power and prestige, which will bring many accidents to Li Huai. You die. However, on the bright side, the old blind man took out a yellowed book from his sleeve and threw it on Tao Ting. There is no credit for protecting the road all the way, only hard work. This is the first half of the mountain-making art, the second half, talk about it later. Tao Ting held the book in both hands, his eyes were red, and he was extremely excited. As the ancestor of Hushan Mountain in the wild world, it goes without saying that he is not much worse than that of Yuan Shou, except that the mountain chain afterwards is much inferior to Yuan Shou. Otherwise, it's Tao Ting's turn to sit in that seat of the throne. If you are the first Yuan, you will hear Tao Ting brother. Instead of sneaking around on the edge of the 100,000 mountains twice, you will eat yourself if you find a chance. Why is Tao Ting willing to be a watchdog for the old blind man? Didn't he rush to this mountain refining formula? Li Huai patted the table and asked, do you mean to be a sage? The Taoist Nen had just gotten a big deal, and felt that there was a sense of tension in the house. If this fights, it will definitely be him, and it will never be Uncle Li, so he started to move. The old blind man nodded. Never thought that Li Huai opened his eyebrows and smiled, walked around behind the old blind man, rubbed his shoulders on the old blind man's back, and whispered, "This time, let's not take it as an example. Returning home this time, father, mother and Li Lu, if they know such a thing, they can't laugh at it. Besides, there is the brother-in-law who has never met. I heard that he was born in the scholarly family of Luzhou in Beiju, so I can't let my sister get married and give her in-laws a low look. Now there is a younger brother who is a wise man in the academy, who can speak hard." Li Huai reminded, "That's all right. Gentlemen or something, don't mess around, or I will be anxious with you, then most of the relationship between the master and apprentice of the two of us will fade." The old blind man still nodded. The title of gentleman is a fart, and then let the Confucian temple directly give it to the head of the college. However, judging from the temper of this kid, Li Huai, it seems that he has not always liked to get out. As a master, you have to carefully weigh and think carefully about what to give to your apprentice. In the end, it depends on the apprentice's mood to accept it. The old blind man and Li Huai are indeed rare pairs of masters and disciples. Li Huai sat back to his place and continued to read a book of Jianghu romance. He suddenly raised his head and smiled at the old blind man. "I just saw a saying in the book that there are no ugly branches in the old tree. Master, you look like when you were young. Shouldn't it be bad?" The old blind man smiled and nodded, "It's not bad." Back then, Chen Qingdu and Long Jun had been jealous of this matter. The Taoist Nen looked at an old blind man with an old face. The old blind man is the one who dislikes turning over the old almanac least. But it was on Li Huai's side that they were willing to talk about it. The old tree spirit tremblingly asked, "Who are you?" The old blind man asked, "Who?" The old tree spirit wiped the sweat on his forehead and did not dare to speak. The old blind man stood up and said, "In the future, I will go to Shirwan Dashan when I am free." Li Huai followed and got up and said that in a while, he took out a package from the bookcase and handed it to the old blind man. He smiled and said, "It's all miscellaneous books. Going back there is a pastime." The old blind man was in his sleeve, stepped out of his sleeve, and returned to the wilderness. At 3 shifts that day, the old boatman, Gu Qingsong, sneaked through the night, hiding his traces all the way, and touched the Kung Dalin. He had a good talk with that Jing Xingxi before he let the other party agree to help inform him. Gu Qingsong is so good to talk to others if he asks for it. Otherwise, if you are flat, you would just jump out of the stone and talk nonsense with you. What if the backing is a Confucian temple? What if it is the most sacred master? We are both scholars, whoever is taller and the other is shorter. Gu Qingsong finally met Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan clasped his fist and said, "Gu Senior." Gu Qingsong waved his hand, "Don't pay attention to these generations, some are not hypocritical." In fact, Gu Qingsong said this sentence to himself. Otherwise, Chen Pingan respectfully called him Gu Lao Zhu, Gu Lao Xianjun, what's the problem? Or in terms of other generations, then he should be regarded as Mrs. Gui's generation. Yu Chen Pingan called Mrs. Gui aunt, isn't it his junior? Someday, this kid will call his uncle. Thinking about it this way, Gu Qingsong felt that even if he called Brother Chin tonight, Uncle Chin, he would not lose. Anyway, I will come back later. When the time comes, I will take Mrs. Gui, who has become a Taoist couple, and then stay in the Luopa mountain without moving away. Every day, I will go to this kid to hang around. Chen Pingan asked with a smile, "Miss Gui hates you?" Lao Zhozi said confidently, "Of course I don't hate it. I don't like it or not, it's hard to say for now. Originally, As long as the old Gu Song said annoyance, Chen Pingon could send him away in a few words. For example, if you want Mrs. Gue to like you, the first step is not to hate you first. How not to hate you, just like silently from a distance. In this way, Mrs. Gue can also be clean, and Gu Song will continue to like Gue. Lady. As a result, Gu Song came to this sentence. Chen Pingon had to change the question, and said very humanely, Ms. Gue is my elder. Do you think I teach you how to like her? Is it appropriate? Gu Song frowned and said, don't talk nonsense, it'll give you money after teaching knowledge. What the hell, isn't it just asking for money? I have got. He first shrank the mountains and rivers, with vast magical powers, and was superior to the ordinary Ascension realm. Then he hurried out into the sea. I found the night ship, and started to stalk, insisting on boarding, and vowing to make sure that I would never go crazy. Just talking about finding a night ship, Xiancha can be said to be the best person in the world. The boat advocated that the master appeared at the bow, overlooking the flat boat above the sea, and joked with a smile, if I remember correctly, didn't I ask you not to come? Xiancha held the bamboo wormwood and asked confidently, did you beg me? I won't come if I ask, I will come if I don't ask. Zhang Fuzi was speechless for a while. Xiancha said, I only look for Mrs. Li in Lingxi City, and I will leave after talking to her. Zhang Fuzi smiled and asked, I beg her to help Mrs. Gue write a piece of text. Lao Zhouzi complained, Boat Master Zhang, you are an older person. Why do you like to ask questions so much? Open the door and give way, and just stay cool. After the entanglement, the old boat arrived at Lingxi City smoothly, and he really only said a word before leaving. Then the old Zhouzi opened his voice and shouted, the owner, no respond. Mr. Zhang, how about people? Don't pretend to be deaf, I know you are there. Still the world is silent. So Lao Zhouzi began to curse, your uncle, let me disembark. No matter how unjust, the mountains are high, remember to be careful in the future. It was the first time Xiancha traveled on a night ship. There was Lucian by his side at the time, so naturally he came and left as he wanted. Later on boarding the ship for the second time, Mrs. Li felt annoyed and asked the owner to send the person off the ship. This time, the disembarkation was suspended. I never thought that Xiancha sneered. He actually left the ferry directly by relying on the secret method that was not taught to Chen Pingon. However, the injury was not light, and the fall was not enough, but at least it wiped out the hard work of 100 years of refining energy. Mrs. Li smiled and said, you will definitely be held hostage. Master Zhang said, don't care about him. He curiously asked, what did Xiancha say before? As the owner of the ship, it wasn't that he couldn't hear it, but because of his respect to Lingxi City, he deliberately didn't listen. Mrs. Li said, he and I suggested a city master to choose. Master Zhang said, Chen Pingon. Mrs. Li nodded. Zhang Fuzi smiled and said, on the surface, he is the least suitable for Lingxi City. The night ship plans to open up 4 new cities, and the number of cities will change from 12 to 16. His earliest idea was to let Chen Pingon occupy one of the new cities. Master Zhang turned his head and asked, do you want to travel far? And this woman's long journey will be a farewell to heaven and earth. She nodded and said, it was on the ferry that I learned about the pros of the shipowner. The people and birds in the lake are beautiful, the sky, the clouds, the mountains and the water are all white, and there are 2 or 3 mustard seeds in Renzhou Pavilion. I have been in Linen for a long time. I never knew that the snow scene over there could be so touching. So I plan to leave after watching a heavy snowfall, drink the 3 great whites and goodbye, but I don't know if I have this amount of alcohol. Zhang Fuzi asked, what about Lingxi? Mrs. Li said, it's okay to stay here. Life has just begun and shouldn't end there. The young boy with antlers, who likes to hold sleeves with both hands, stretched out his sleeves and begged Zhang Fuzi, "Owner, can I disembark with the owner? I may not board the ship in the future." Master Zhang smiled and nodded and said, "Why not? The freest thing in the world is learning. No matter where the spirit is, isn't it in the night ship?" Mrs. Li and the boy with antlers together thanked the ship owner and said goodbye. After Master Zhang laughed, he solemnly repaid the matter, and said softly, "I am fortunate to see Mr. Linen in this life." On the top floor of Baiyujing, Lu Chen sat on the railing, learning from the martial arts martial artist, holding a fist, shaking vigorously a few times, and said with a smile, "Congratulations, brother, I'm really invincible." Yudo turned his head and found this junior, with a hippie smile and joking words, but his eyes were like Gujing Yuxian. He asked, "What's the solution?" Lu Chen rubbed his chin, "No solution. The boat is naturally straight when it reaches the bridge." Yudo sneered and said, "This is not the reason why you are here to stay away from the sky." Lu Chen cried repeatedly, "I really don't want to go. It's all hard work. In the world of Qingming, can we come up with a wizard of heaven and solve that problem once and for all?" Yudo said nothing. Knowing that junior brother Lu Chen was complaining about his shot that year, he asked Jian Dashuan Duguan. On the cliff side of Shanhaizong, Nailin Xianxiu pinned the cigarette rod to her waist, got up and said, "Go." The girl Feitsue helped the little girl roll up the bamboo mat. While busy, the little girl went to the green shirt guest and said, "Sword Fairy, don't forget, we are friends. We will visit each other more in the future." Chen Ping'an agreed with a smile. Finally, the little girl held the rolled-up bamboo mat and swayed away, but she slowed down without any reason to remember the separation back then. At that time, the little girl was picked up home by an older sister. In the latter's hometown, they were sitting on the first stroke of the word, the latter sitting in the middle, looking not so far away. One called Luopashan the place. At this moment, the little girl glanced at the sky, red eyes, and lowered her head, raised her arm to wipe her eyes, and said dully, "The biggest villain in the world is that Chen Pingan." Chen Pingan just stared ahead and looked towards the sea, silent. The woman in white leaned the sword with one hand, looked into the distance, and smiled. In the blink of an eye, 10,000 years have passed and another 10,000 years have passed. Chen Pingan nodded, as if blinking. He is 45 years old. She asked, "Does the master know that this was once a place where a more important spell fell?" Chen Pingan shook his head, "I don't know. I didn't see it on the archives of the Summer Palace, and I didn't hear your husband and brother mention it at the Confucian Temple." She and Chen Pingan roughly talked about the long-lost truth that Shanhaizong was once an ancient battlefield site. It was the place where the battle between water and fire ended. Therefore, the Taoism is endless, the spells are scattered, and the Taoist rhyme is left in the world. It is the opportunity of the immortal family for later generations of Qi practitioners to practice. It's just that there are not many records on the Confucian Temple, and only the saints and sages of the past can read them. Therefore, the head of the college may not even know. She smiled and said, "In that colorful world, there will definitely be a cultivating embryo that naturally defeats Ningyao in the future. Anyway, it will definitely not be Jian Xiu. There is a great dispute with Ningyao, so let Ningyao not take it lightly. She has become a sword repairman in the Ascension realm, and can sit back and relax from now on. She will not be invincible in the colorful world forever." Chen Pingan asked, "Is this person one of the greatest blessings in the colorful world? Does the Daoist forces including Bai Yujing have the best chance of getting this person? Even if there is such a person, whether it is Ningyao, He Chen Pingan, an ascending city, even if he knows this secret in advance, he will not make the plan on the mountain that relies on the evolution of yin and yang to derive from the main road and then cut the grass and root. She nodded. From the current point of view, the possibility of Daomen is relatively high. But it is not a fixed number who will get the flowers. People and gods live together, weird and mixed, such as today's luck is still dark and unclear. So the other few opportunities, specifically what, it's not easy to say for the time being. It may be that the great road of the sky is manifested into something, and whoever gets it will be sheltered by a great road of the world, or it may be a certain geographical advantage, such as a place that Bai Yi and old scholars could not find. The blessed land of the cave can support the growth of a 14th-level monk. Anyway, Ning Yao has succeeded in slaying the single-eyed one of the upper gods. At least a few hundred years of time, he can be the number one in the world. It's time to be content with a person's position. During this period, if she can't break the border and take away the title of number one, she can't blame others. She laughed. That little master, didn't you tell the master? Chen Pingon shook his head and said, the saint of rituals didn't talk about this, so I dare not ask more. She said, it really is a little master, not grandiose. The term little master was the first nickname given by Bai Zhe to Li Xing. Only monks who write the old almanac instead of translating the old almanac are qualified to call the saint like that. For example, she next to Chen Pingan, one of the 5 highest heavenly courts, a sword-bearer. Chen Pingan's interest changed the subject. The armor-clad man was beheaded by you outside the sky and fell completely. Part of the reason is that there is a new armor-clad man in the Tianting ruins. To put it simply, the higher the gods, the more a carrot and a pit. The close disciple of the great ancestor of Tuo Yushan, Li Zhen, once a sword cultivator of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, observes. His natal flying sword, the long river of time, is too mysterious, making Li Zhen born suitable for the new armored man. With these words, Chen Pingon didn't sacrifice a caged bird, or even used his own voice. He always said whatever he wanted. She is there. Who dares to spy on this place? She hummed, patted the hilt of the sword lightly with her palm, and said, that's it, show me help to plant that sighting, which made my old friend's divine position unstable, plus the previous attack on Haoran and leashing ruthlessly of fight will affect his combat power. But these are not the real reasons why he was beheaded by me. He is not as powerful as me, but with defense, he is indeed indestructible and will be injured, even if I shoot down. His golden body fragments, scattered and scattered, can manifest as alien rivers, but it is still very difficult to really kill him, unless I have been chasing him for thousands of years. I have no such patience. In fact, after a fight, a brand new golden galaxy did appear far away from the sky, spreading for tens of millions of miles. What she meant was like the armor-clad man begged to die, and finally voluntarily surrendered the prominent position of God and gave it to Li Zhen, or to be precise, to Zhou Mi. If the sword-bearers and the saints of rights fail to prevent the armored ones from returning to their hometowns and successfully return to the old heavenly ruins, with a careful mind, it is estimated that the end of the game will not be better. Chen Pingon asked softly, will you be sad if you have to kill the armored man yourself? The sword-bearer and the armored man have fought side by side for thousands of years. As she said, they are old friends. She shook her head and explained, don't be sad, where the golden body is, it is the cage. The lower gods, the golden body will dissolve in the long river of time, and the death of the higher gods will disappear, which is a kind of distance that future cultivators cannot understand. You are free both physically and mentally. The pitiful thing about the old gods is that their words and deeds, and even all their thoughts, are strictly in accordance with the established context. Over time, this is actually not a very interesting thing. Like the meaning of existence, it is just for existence. So the immortality pursued tirelessly by later generations of trainers has become a big prison in our eyes. Chen Pingon took out the sword gourd, took a sip of wine, and murmured, "Is it possible to understand that compared to your gods, people will make mistakes and correct mistakes, so morality is a kind of freedom in our hearts?" She smiled and said, "It is a kind of freedom to think so." Just as Chen Pingan was about to speak, she raised the sword and said, "I really left this time." The tall figure of the woman in white turned into thousands of white sword lights, scattered in all directions, ignoring the restriction of the formation of Shanhaizong, and finally gathered her figure at the sky, overlooking the world. Chen Pingan silently remembered the complicated trajectory of the sword light, then pinned the sword-raising gourd to his waist, raised his head, and waved goodbye to her. In the next moment, Chen Pingan controlled the sword heart and recited Tao Ju silently. His figure instantly turned into hundreds of sword lights, like a blue lotus blooming on the edge of a cliff, and then spreading out to the sea beyond the cliff. In the end, Jianguang slammed into the big mountain and river formation, like a person hitting a wall. One swayed, Jianguang condensed into his body, and fell straight into the sea. In the distance, there is a tall building in Shanhaizong, Nailan Xianqiu, holding a cigarette stick, spit out a mouthful of clouds and mist, and said in amazement, "Good escape." She waved her sleeves and opened the ban. He jumped out of the water in a green shirt, and did not leave the wind, but ran wildly on the water. The night ship appeared in the distance. Chen Pingan clicked on the water, jumped onto the bow, and when his feet landed, he came to a strange city. Chen Pingan stood under the eaves, concentrating his eyes, and found that not far from the downtown area, the bustling and crowded, as if there was a ring, there seemed to be two martial arts fighters on the stage, each holding a pen to sign the life and death certificate. One of them, the brawny man, arrogant, wrote his name, so he might not even recognize him. Then he slammed his pen and was responsible for putting away the two life and death scholars. He was busy picking up the brush on the ground and cursing. Reckless man. The four of Ningyao were just here to join in the fun. They didn't go to the crowds and watched the martial arts arena on the second floor of a restaurant not far away. Ningyao and Pei Qian are okay, they just need to stand at the window, and the small rice grains and the white-haired boy can only show two small heads. When Chen Pingan appeared in this city, Ningyao turned his head and looked at the green shirt with a sword on the back. Chen Pingan waved his hand and motioned them to stand still, and went to look for them by himself. On the second floor of the restaurant, Chen Pingan found that the tables beside Ningyao's wine table were all self-proclaimed young handsome men and brothers. They didn't even bother to watch the competition in the ring. They were talking and laughing and talking about famous martial arts places. The deeds of the rivers and lakes, the drunk man means only outside the wine. Talking about those long famous masters, the idle clouds and wild cranes on the rivers and lakes. Always don't forget to bring yourself, or your master, just fortunately to drink together. Have been pointed by XX Sword Fairy and XX Xinquan. Ningyao turned around and sat back to his original position. Pei Qian smiled and nodded with the master. Xiaomi Li saw the good man Mountain Lord and pursed his lips. The white-haired boy saw the hermit ancestor, and shed tears. Chen Pingan originally wanted to sit next to Ningyao, but Xiaomi Li gave up his bench, and the white-haired boy who was a step slower wiped it back and forth with his sleeves, gently blowing dust. Chen Pingan took the bowl of wine that Pei Qian handed over, and asked with a smile, "Here?" Pei Qian whispered, "Taiping City." Also known as Jiazi City, one of the middle four cities. It is the only place on the night ship where there are no cultivators, and it has been rare for ordinary masters for 70 years. It is estimated that a cultivator in the middle 5 realm is random, no need to be an immortal, just a Sevuing realm cultivation base, and he is the #1 person in the world. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Why are you here for a stroll?" Ningyao said in his heart, "We were in Lingxi City and met the criminal Haosu who came from Appearance City." Chen Pingan nodded, and saw that there was a lot of water in Ningyao's bowl, so he didn't help to pour the wine. It doesn't matter if money is drinking, it's a genius. Look at the millet grains and drink wine, but Chen Ping's sight just arrived. There are no silver in the millet grains. I stretched out my hand to cover the wine bowl. It's water, not wine. I don't know what wine tastes like. It's not good, it's not delicious, it's so spicy, and fools spend money. Buy wine and drink. The white-haired boy sitting side by side with the millet grains gloated, yes, it's a fool who spends money on alcohol. Chen Pingan smiled and said, wait for you to check out. The white-haired boy was crippled with food, and then he raised the wine bowl, with a flat face, the hidden official ancestor, pedantic, scheming, and calculating. This trip to the Confucian temple must be a showstopper, and the fame has moved the world. I will mention a bowl here. Chen Pingan shook his head, drank a drink, and frowned slightly. Ning Yao asked, what's the matter? Have a fight with someone? Chen Pingan smiled and said, I fought a few fights, mainly with Chao Ci, and suffered some injuries. Pei Qian raised his ears. Chen Ping'an took out the porcelain bottle presented by brother Jun Qian, poured out a pill, patted it into his mouth, swallowed it with the wine, and said, Chao Ci is still great, I lost. Ning Yao didn't worry too much about Chen Pingan as soon as he heard that it was a fist with Chao Ci. Both sides must have played well. Moreover, seeing Chen Pingan right now, there was no sluggish air. Instead, he was full of punches and became more refined, which is a good thing. Chen Pingan held back a smile and said to Pei Qian, although the master lost the punch, Chao Ci was beaten into a pig by the master, and he did not lose. Pei Qian scratched his head. Didn't the master say that swearing, shorting, beating, and slapped people are all taboos? Chen Pingan said, whatever you are polite with Chao Ci, you are all old friends. Pei Qian grinned. Drinking wine, Chen Pingan and Ning Yao said each in their hearts. The white-haired boy pulled the short winter melon and millet grains and continued to watch the competition in the arena. The millet grains accompanied the short winter melon on tiptoes, leaning on the window and watching the humming haha on the other side of the arena, fisting. Chen Pingan gave an overview of the Confucian temple discussion, and Ning Yao gave a reminder from the criminal officer Hao Su. Ning Yao finally remembered something, the Dajiaishan ferry. Except for some monks who are willing to stay on the night cruise, the ferry and everyone else, Master Zhang has already let go. Chen Pingan smiled and said, after the catastrophe, a false alarm is the best practice. So you still have a lot of faith. If it were me, the shipowner would either simply not show up. Even if he shows up, he will definitely be with me. Ask the price and pay back. Not any sword repairer can ban the ferry with the sword in his hand if nothing happens. This is the tribute of the master of the night ship's opinion to the first person in a brand new world. Ning Yao said in a bad mood, it is obviously because of the face of Li Xing, it has nothing to do with me. Chen Pingan smiled brilliantly, it's true that this time, it's probably only me. The Saint of Rights personally came forward, receiving and sending. Ning Yao smiled and said, what a great promise. An old master appeared at the wine table out of thin air and asked with a smile, can you ask Mr. Chen and Ms. Ning for a bowl of wine? His abrupt appearance is like a guest near the wine table, even if he has been paying attention to Chen Pingan, an unobtrusive drinker, he didn't notice it, as if he only felt that it was just right. Chen Pingan clasped his fists and smiled, I have seen shipowner Zhang, just sit down. After Zhang Fuzi took his seat, he took out a wine glass from his sleeve. After Master Zhang left, Ning Yao came to ask his sight. Chen Pingan put all the fulu into his sleeves and said, first, strive for a relationship between non-enemies and non-friends, and then have some business contacts, so that each other is icing on the cake. Ning Yao nodded. Then she doesn't have to think about everything about night sailing, anyway, he is good at it. On the other side of the window, the white-haired boy said that he was also a master, and he wanted to fly there to stand on the stage and help the hermit ancestor to win the title of invincible hand in the world. You can wrong yourself, just say that it is one of the disciples of the ancestor of the hidden official, or the one who is the least successful. The millet grains hugged the white-haired boy vigorously to prevent her from causing trouble, swaying and moving closer to the wine table. The white-haired boy kicked his legs indiscriminately and screamed. The little girl in black could not say that it was impossible, and the reputation of the world could not be so. Chen Pingan didn't stop them from making a fuss, thinking about the so-called 20 people of the criminal officer. Haosu himself, Xingyang Yamada Wan, the fairy Han Yushu of Sanshan Fudi, it is very likely that someone from Chonglin Zone will be added. Since the criminal officer Haosu came to the night ship, he stayed for a long time on the side of the city. So the city lord of the shape, alias Xiao Baowan. This person may be an alternate member, so it is convenient to fill the vacancy at any time. Of course, it does not rule out that the other party is a full member, one of 20 people, but it is very hidden. In this way, Xiao Baowan was on the side of Entry City and designed himself step by step, and there was enough reason. And Kaiyang Glinzong, with the northern part of Luzhou, the great sword fairy Bai Chang, and Su Xian, has a deep relationship. Because Su Xian is the person behind the scenes of the Chonglin sect, Lu Jinglong had reminded him of this matter, otherwise he would have shown his unpleasant hometown sword immortal and martial swordsman and Wu with the Yupu realm cultivation base of the sect master Chonglin master of learning. You are looking for teeth all over the floor. How many of the Qi trainers and pure martial arts in Luzhou and Beiju are good to talk? Often giving people a sack of sap, or throwing a spell at the patriarch hall of another family, flying swords like rain, do not need a reason. The big business stalls of Kai and Glinzong, up and down the hills, all over the continent of Luzhou in Beiju, even in Iazhao and Aquarius, there are many industries. Just say that the Xianjia mansion near the top of the mountain is a veritable Jinshan Inshan. When Chonglinzong found Kaik mansion at the beginning, about the robe, he offered excellent conditions to Kaik mansion over and over again, and he always behaved very well. On the bright side, Gao Qing, Pu Qi, and Dewanyu temple monks in Shaoxian are hidden to view the real Ghost Valley. In fact, it's just a pile of scattered sand, a group of scattered mountain forces, and a city that doesn't have long feet. So it's nominally signed a contract with Maishan. The well water does not violate the river water, but in private, one by one, they all take the initiative to Pimazong. Accept surrender. Chen Pingan pointed to the places of cultivation outside the small world of the ghost mythical valley, and smiled. Sanlang Temple has a secret futon. If you have the opportunity, you can buy a few to bring back to Luopa Mountain. In the previous Luopa Mountain, there were a lot of pure martial artists and few monks. When Chen Pingan returned to his hometown this time, the situation was changed. Only Bai Xian included 9 sword fairy embryos. Like that Jiang Chu, who became a relatively rare Fulu monk, Chen Pingan recategorized the authentic alchemy book and divided it into 3 volumes according to the degree of difficulty of the painting. In addition to Li Zixing's existing narration notes, Chen Pingan also added some of his own talisman experience, so after getting the manuscript, Jiang Chu naturally cherished it very much. Chen Pingan came to the Ghost Mythical Valley. Actually, he mainly wanted to take a trip to the Yangchang Palace. He probably wouldn't bring Ningyao, so they could just wait here for a while. On the road of life, you can't only see high mountains like Pitifeng, and an expert like Hulong. Also take a look at the little spirit guarding the gate outside the Yangchang Palace, and take a look at the 2 books it carefully buried under the ground. However, no matter how small the market is, it seems that women can also shop a flower. Ning Yao is no exception. Either she doesn't go shopping, or she is extremely serious if she wants to go shopping, and looking at her posture, she doesn't want a shop left. It's rare to find a rare bookshop at Nehiguin. When it was Chen Ping's turn to go shopping, at the door, Chen Ping stopped suddenly, but he quickly crossed the threshold. Since I saw it, it's a copy. The fate on the mountain is not easy, what to hide. The shopkeeper is a couple of men and women, both in the Dongfu realm. In the Nehiguin market, where the fish and the dragon are mixed, this point of cultivation is very inconspicuous. This small shop sells some relaxed collection and pictures of the goddess bought from the mural city. They make some difference. By relying on these, they are destined to not make a lot of money. Fortunately, there are some shops and fug watching. The sesame mung bean-sized business transactions, along with the sale of some idle goods, are considered to have taken root on the market side. The shop has been open for more than 10 years. If the rent is divided, there are actually not a few gods. It's just that compared with the past windy meals and sleepers, I sharpened my head and looked around for money. After all, I was too stable. The lady boss saw the swordsman in blue shirt who had just walked into the shop. She was so excited that her eyes were flushed. She wiped the corners of her eyes quickly and hit her man's rib with an elbow. The man looked dazed, and then raised his head. After seeing Chen Ping'an, he was in the same mood as his wife, and finally waited for this unnamed savior. Especially the eyes of the young sword fairy in front of them were too familiar. In fact, Chen Ping'an did not know the names of the couple. In the early years, it was just a peaceful meeting, and each one had a whirlpool, and it was logically difficult to meet again. When 5 pairs of whiling ghosts and bones were given away, Chen Ping'an didn't expect to see them. As for what they didn't pay back, Chen Ping'an naturally didn't care at all. Don't worry about how I make money, Chen Ping'an. Never mind how I spend my money. It was the pair of casual cultivators who were involved in risk and making money, and walked into the ghost mythical valley with Chen Ping'an. The female cultivator had average aptitude. In order to break the realm and enter the cave realm, she needed a spiritual tool to help sort out her life's vitality. It's not picking, as ye show, just doing tiring work, not dirty work. Most of the people wandering around are genealogy masters, and Yamazawa Noxiu, especially if the realm is not high. To put it awkwardly, they can only ask for genealogy masters to eat the leftovers, and they have to be careful to make money. Obstruct the latter's eyes. No matter how hard the couple accumulated, they still lacked 500 snowflakes. It was just a woman's practice, which was extremely delayed. In desperation, they had to come to the ghost mythical valley to fight for their lives. The couple, the 2 of them, were at the river temple. On the side, kneeling and kowtow, the most pious, and for so many years, as long as every 15th day of the Lunar New Year, even if you have already repaid, you still go there to worship. The reason why they opened this shop here is to pay back the money. The 2 of them stood side by side, clasped their fists in both hands, and couldn't afford to do anything to the young sword fairy. Chen Ping'an stretched out his hand and gently raised the man's arm, and smiled. It doesn't have to be that way. When the 2 got up, Chen Ping'an and the woman clasped fists in congratulations. Congratulations, madam, for entering the middle 5 level. The woman was a little panicked, and quickly gave a blessing, too nervous to speak. The man introduced him. His name is Jinzhan, the family member of the Yuan dynasty. His wife is Song Jiazi, and the family member of Qingxiguren. It was all coincidence that he embarked on the path of cultivation. According to the agreement with the young sword fairy, they waited for a month at Nehiguin market. Later, I really couldn't continue to delay, so I left the skeleton beach to buy the spiritual tool that was the key to breaking the realm. When Song Jiazi was lucky enough to break the realm, Jinzhan brought his wife to continue waiting for others. Today, facing the Qingshan sword immortal and his party, the 2 of them are unavoidable. In fact, they are a little bit ashamed. They are casual cultivators. How can they dare to call themselves some monks? Whoever becomes a husband and wife is qualified to be called a Taoist couple on the mountain, an unwritten rule on this mountain. Chen Pingon smiled and said, "My name is Chen Pingon, from Longquan County of Aquarius Island. There is a mountain called Luopa Mountain. It is located in the boundary of Beiyue and very close to Piyun Mountain. Welcome to the south and lower reaches. Go to my side. Sit on the hill." Who doesn't know about Piyun Mountain? The monarch Weibo, a very famous monk in Beiju Luzhou, has generally heard of it. So the fairy mountain, which is very close to Beiyue, can be a small mountain? Certainly not. The man glanced at his wife. "What?" "I guessed it right," he said, that Grace must be a genealogical master. The spirit of the gods back then, the heroic spirit of not treating money as money, can it be wild cultivation? Song Jiazi gave him a white look. What's so competitive about this kind of thing? Besides, I guess that this benefactor is from a wealthy family, and it may not be wrong. Chen Ping'an pointed to Pei Qian and introduced with a smile, "This is my disciple, Pei Qian, Wu Fu." Then stretched out his hand to hold down the head of the millet grain. "Our mountain guard is enshrined," called Zhou Mili. Pei Qian clasped his fists in a salute. The millet puffed his chest. Ning Yao introduced himself. "My name is Ning Yao, Jian Xiu." Can't let Chen Pingon introduce him, God knows what nonsense he would talk about. Jin Zhan whispered, "Chen Jianxian, will I get that money for you?" Chen Pingon nodded and smiled, "Okay." Song Jiazi walked around behind the counter and took out a bag of fairy money. Chen Pingon didn't count it either, and put it directly into his sleeve. Chen Pingon thought for a while, and took a book with the shop for nothing, which was the safe collection that Ning Yao chose. Without much chatting, Chen Pingon left, and the couple took them to the door of the shop. They gathered and scattered. One party continued to travel the market, and the other continued to open the door to welcome guests. The couple breathed a sigh of relief, and finally even paid back the profit, feeling a little better in their hearts. In fact, Chen Jiangxian's life-saving grace and the virtue of continuation can be repaid by a bag of fairy money. Knowing that the sword fairy definitely didn't care about the money, but they cared very much, but more, they didn't seem to be able to do anything, so they could only put a great kindness in their hearts for a long time. For example, I will go to Sui River to burn incense in the future. I can pray for those gods and Taoists who are both sword celestials and know their names. After strolling around the shop, Ning Yao, Pei Qian and a few selected items inside, while Chen Pingon stood at the door of the shop. There are two northbound roads in Ghost Mythical Valley, which go to the towns of Qinglu and Lanxi respectively. One is dangerous, with winding mountains and rivers, and many opportunities. The other is safe and stable, which is more suitable for enjoying the scenery. Chen Pingon chose to go to the small town of Qinglu at the time, and has never been to Lanmu since then. Chen Pingon is familiar with Greasy Skin City, Copper Smelly City, and Chen Pingon, especially the latter, who also traded there, changed the face of Master Zhang, and a female ghost shopkeeper named Xinguan, and the self-appointed person. The sister of the city master of the school prime minister sold a lot of boudoir items that were raided from Daongshan. It can even be said that Chen Pingan's work as a baghouse seemed to have started in the city of Tongxiang. Looking back now, the city of Tongxiang is actually the name is pretty good. As for the heroic city lord of Ghost Mythical Valley, those great monsters that year were collectively called the Six Sages, and their Dao names and nicknames were bigger than the other, which can scare people. The Summer Lady of Peeling Mountain, the Great Lord Pikhen of Daongshan, the Emperor Thor of Jishu Mountain, the Great Immortal Catching Demon of Dirty Water Cave Mansion, and the Great Sage of Moving Mountain, the Great King Heiha. On the street, there appeared a little ghost who barely transformed into a human form, carrying a big basket, full of flowers, herbs, soil, and strange stones in the Ghost Valley. Come here to exchange money and buy books. It comes from the Yangchang Palace where the great immortal catching demon is located. Now Phi Ma Zong can't help the weird spirits and charms of the ghost mythical valley, just hang this sign that looks like click, and it will be recorded in the file. Chen Pingan stood at the door of the shop with sleeves in his hands. The street was bustling. He still saw the little monster who was guarding the Yangchang Palace at a glance. He said in his heart and waved hello. The mouse spirit rushed all the way, still thin with a bamboo pole, and said with great surprise, "Master Sword Immortal?" Chen Pingan smiled and nodded, "Long time no see. Have you bought a book?" It nodded, "No, it's not cheap. Don't dare to go far. The Nihiguan market where the gods and gods get together is not a place to sell books and buy books." So roughly after I first entered the ghost mythical valley that year, in Crow Ridge, I encountered a female ghost in white, one of the 4 major ghosts in the city of Greasy Skin. She was called by I Ching by the Lord Fan Yunluo. The female ghost, half-faced makeup, seemed to be a military commander's concubine, and later, was Fan Yunluo, who was named Rouge Marquis in the Ghost Valley. This heroic spirit of the subjugated princess before his death was riding in a jewel-like emperor's carriage, wearing a phoenix crown, but she was a girl. Anyway, the two sides just borrowed one frame, fought each other, and made a very unpleasant feud. If it weren't for the swordsman Pu Yen, Chen Pingan would be able to chase down to the city of Fugua, and come to the end. Listening to Chen Pingan's words, Ning Yao suddenly asked, "Why don't you write more notes for such a wonderful landscape story?" Chen Pingan asked, "Is it exciting?" The white-haired boy said, "The hidden official ancestor said it was wonderful, and if it was not wonderful, it was not wonderful." "Do you think the hidden official ancestor is wonderful?" Pei Qian blinked and said nothing. Millet turned her elbow out and nodded vigorously. "It's so wonderful, it's a mess, and it's so exciting." Alas, this good mountain lord, the wise one, was confused for a while and couldn't understand. "If I helped you now, how can I help you with Sister Ning in private in the future? When the time comes to speak fair, it will not be credible." After listening to everyone's opinions, Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Then I have such a landscape story in the future, so I must write more and don't hesitate to write." The group left the Skeleton Beach. Yufang went to Yinping Country Suzhou town. During the period, passing by Yuehua Mountain and Jingguangfeng, it seems that those two mountains are strange and have a deep blessing, and they have followed Li Zixing's practice for many years. Last time Pei Qian traveled north with Li Huai and Wei Taizhen, the Fox Charm, during which he also made a special trip to the Ghost Axe Palace to find Diu. It's just that the 3 tricks Senior Du, who made Pei Qian respect very much, was not on the mountain at the time. Chen Pingan didn't plan to go to Ghost Axe Palace this time. Just because of Du Ye's temper, he definitely likes to hang around in the rivers and lakes. Living. The incense flourishes in the Sueja city, Fire Temple. The city's temple in the north of the city has also been replaced by a new city's god. The big bearded man in the Vulcan temple, after stepping out of the golden statue of colored sculpture, still looks the same. For 20 years, for a time-long landscape deity, it is really a snap. Chen Pingan and the big bearded man were drinking wine. "I heard that the incense of Tiaoshi, the master of Shaoxi Canal Narcissus Temple, was also much better. As for the mother of Tiaoxi Canal, she changed a female hero." On the side of Yuyinjia in Chunlapu, I met a young sword fairy who wandered all over the world. He only knew the surname Qin. Pei Qian respectfully held his fist in a salute and called Mr. Liu. Last time I visited Jinwu Palace, Liu Jiqing was like a teacher, half a family elder, and even carefully checked Pei Qian's copy of the book. Finally, he said that your writing is better than master. Chen Ping introduced with a smile, Ning Yao. Lu Jiqing was greatly surprised, and quickly reduced his mind, pinched the sword tactic ceremony with one hand, and said solemnly, Golden Crow Palace Lu Jiqing, I have seen Ning Jianxian. Ning Yao clasped his fists in return, I have seen Mr. Lu. If you call Lu Jianxian, it seems wrong. Not to talk about the custom of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, just say that Ning Yao himself is an ascendant sword repairman. If another Yuanying sword repairer is called a sword fairy, it is estimated that both sides will feel uncomfortable. Chen Pingan shook his head, slanderously, this guy is not as good as he is. I was at the Longshu River blacksmith's shop, beside Lu Xianying, and I saw Xiaoyu, what did I shout? So when you Lu Jiqing saw Ning Yao, wouldn't you even shout at your sister-in-law? I don't know how to accept the seniority given to you for nothing. Lu Jiqing looked at the white-haired boy. Chen Pingan said in his heart, it's not suitable to say more. Lu Jiqing understood it, nodded, and stopped asking. Ascended to the realm of the outer demon, her real name is Natural, the world is Qingming, and Wushuangjiang, Taoist couple, the opportunity for the 14th realm of harmony. Which argument is not a taboo of being one-on-one on the mountain. The white-haired boy waited for a long time, and saw the hidden official ancestor at his friend's side. He didn't even mention himself, and was heartbroken. He sat on a chair with his head down, his boots kicking his boots. Chen Pingan smiled and said, go down the mountain with me. I heard that Lu Jinglong is now in Luzhou, Beiju. He is so majestic. He is recognized as invincible for drinking. Let's kill his wine table spirit together. Lu Jiqing chuckled, if you don't go, you have to retreat and practice your sword. Chen Pingan continued to persuade, what kind of sword to practice, don't rush for a while, now we are only one step away, completely negligible. Lu Jiqing smiled and said, I won't give off to Lord Qin Shan. Chen Pingan hugged Lu Jiqing's shoulder, but Gina sprinkled salt on this guy's wound, and said, yeah, I'm a big fan, why, bullying me is not Yuaning Jianxian. Lu Jiqing raised his hand, put his fingers together, and pushed Chen Pingan away. Chen Pingan smiled and said in his heart, by the way, to be serious, in the next few years, I plan to travel to the divine continent of China, and I will call Lu Jinglong. Do you have any ideas? Let's go together. In the early years at the ferry near Chunlapu, I made an appointment with Lu Jinglong, and I will travel to China together in the future. Lu Jiqing shook his head and said, I won't go down the mountain unless I enter the Yupu realm. One day I will be among the Yupu, and the first place to go is not Zhong to Shenzhou. I hope it won't be too late. If you really can't break the bottleneck, then you have to go to the Jianqi Great Wall ruins as Yuanying Jianqiu, and then go south with Yujin. Chen Pingan thought for a while, nodded and said, then break the border sooner. Maybe there is a chance to travel the wild world together. When they arrived at Chunlapu, Chen Pingan separated from Ning Yao and went to find the old woman alone, Lin Chan's teacher of Song Lanqiao. Still holding the younger generation ceremony, visiting the house, and then without the slightest impatience, chatting with the old woman for a long time, Lin Change saw Chen Pingan, and when she saw someone cursing her at the ancestral hall, she suddenly became a kind eye. The old woman sat on a chair, turned sideways, and kept reaching out to hold the hand of the young man next to her, asking about how hard it was to travel these years and how she lost weight. No letter came to Chunlu Garden. This is not good. Don't do this anymore. It will teach people to worry. Have you now found a Taoist couple on the mountain who is a beloved and beautiful family member? If there is, I will bring it to her later, if not, I must hurry up. The old woman took Chen Pingan all the way to the foot of the mountain. Therefore, Chen Pingan only met her in this trip to Chunlu Garden. Song Lanqiao, the fairy steward, Tang Shi, the of wealth, and Tan Ling, the owner of the mountain, didn't see any of them. So when Chenpingon left, he learned that the young sword immortal, the lord of a sect, had come and left. Chunlaput Patriarch Hall held an urgent meeting that day. Wearing a blue shirt, standing at a seaside ferry, the breeze is blowing, the temples are flying, and the sleeves are floating. The bright moon in the sky, the wind on the sea, the green shirt on the earth, you're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.